WALL-E, quite simply, is not only one of the greatest animated films of all time, it's one of the greatest films period of all time. It is the prime example of not only how animated films are just as much for adults as they are for kids, but also how animated films can be art. The first half hour features 2 characters and very little dialogue outside of some quick exposition, yet we understand these characters so well at the end of the first act. WALL-E is something of a loner. He is perfectly happy with living on his own, working his job, and simply keeping himself amused with what he finds during the day. But like anyone, he does desire some company from time to time. He is naturally curious, and he has made a hobby out of collecting interesting items he finds. It is this curiosity that leads him to collect the plant that will be the film's MacGuffin, and first draws him to Eve. In fact, the only reason he is even there when Eve arrives is because he sees a red light on the ground and simply wondered what it was. Eve, meanwhile, being a loner herself, is far more hostile and uneasy about company. The first thing she does upon seeing WALL-E is try to blow him up. Even after she properly meets WALL-E and has a laugh with him, she still points her gun at him as soon as he gets too close to her. Eve is defensive of herself, while WALL-E is more open to new things, but lacks the self-confidence or experience to know how best to approach them. In many ways, the relationship between these 2 characters isn't really all that different from what has been seen in many romantic comedies. Even Eve's more sleek design is very typical of the way females are generally portrayed in films. The real core elements of the story are things that have been done in film a lot in the past, but because it's being done in a different way, it gives it a very different tone and look, making it feel like you're watching something completely original. The design of the 2 main characters is another thing that I love. WALL-E is given a working class, less aesthetically pleasing look to him, riffling through trash and being covered in dirt and rust. The large lenses that he has for eyes almost look like a large pair of glasses. And of course, as we all know, wearing glasses in a film make you a geek. Eve, meanwhile, has a more sleek and therefore more glamorous design, with her anti-gravity device and no visible joints. It's also remarkable how many emotions Eve goes through during the film, expressing them through nothing more than the shape of her eyes. The second act focuses on the idea that we are allowing technology to take over our lives. However, unlike the Terminator or Blade Runner, where the technology has become self-aware and is now fighting back, here the technology is so advanced that the human race has become completely dependent on it. As a result, when the human race wants to do one thing, and Auto, the computer in charge, wants to do another, they find themselves in a pretty difficult situation. So with Auto being the one thing that is stopping the human race from getting back home, does this make him a villain? There's been a lot of debate about this element of the character. Is Auto really a villain, or just a robot following orders? To me, it makes more sense to think of him as just a robot following orders, since unlike most of the robots in this film, he shows little to no emotion or personality. It also supports the idea that allowing technology to take over our lives is not the right thing to do. Sure, the captain does everything in his power to stop Auto during the final act, but ultimately he's the one that put his trust in Auto in the first place, and is likely the one that programmed him, so he really has no one else to blame but himself. He is also clearly based on HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, what with him having a similar character arc and the red light in the middle of his body. The really amazing thing about Auto, however, is his motivations are actually more believable than HAL's. You see, as much as I love HAL, I never understood why he thought it was worth killing the other crew members in order to carry out the mission. Who would program a computer to think like that? Auto, however, never endangers anyone's life, at least not directly. All he wished was to keep them in space, because those were his orders. Now, let's not forget our 2 heroes in all of this. WALL-E's intentions was to ensure Eve's safety after she goes into standby, while Eve, much like Auto, is focused purely on her directive, as she puts it, delivering the plant to the captain. It's only when she sees the escape pod WALL-E is in explode and believes for a moment that he is dead, that we start to see a change in her. During the third act of the film, it becomes less and less about returning the ship to Earth, and more about saving WALL-E. When the ship lands at the end of the film, are we really thinking about the fact that the human race has finally returned after 700 years? No, because the real story has now become about the trash compacting robot that has made it all possible. There are also plenty of small moments in here to make you smile, like any kid's film. Eve with that Rubik's Cube, Moe's constant annoyance at the foreign contaminant WALL-E keeps leaving, and the robot insane clinic. Every time I watch it, I notice something new that makes me smile or think about things a little differently. It's also one of very few films I've ever seen or I think you actually need to stay for the end credits. Now personally I always stay for the end credits as I feel it's important to acknowledge the people that made it. But I can understand why most people don't do this. The film is after all over. This is one time, however, when the story is not over when the credits roll. There is still the matter of the human race restoring and repopulating Earth. In a sense, the human race is starting again, and this is shown through the evolution of different art styles used during the credits. They consist of cave paintings, Egyptian, Middle Ages, Monet, Van Gogh, Pointillism, and finally 8-bit computer graphics. Overall, this film just has everything. A great character story, an overarching story that gets you thinking about the way the world and technology is evolving, and how these changes are not necessarily a good thing. The ability to make me laugh, as well as tear up, and always gives me something new every time I watch it. To give this film a 10 out of 10 just doesn't do justice to how good I think this film is. So how about this? A 10 out of 10, and the Buck Seal of Awesomeness. Put on your Sunday clothes, there's lots of world out there. Get out your brilliant Steen and dime cigars. We're gonna find adventure in the evening air. Girls in white in a perfume night where the lights are bright as the stars. Put on your Sunday clothes, we're gonna ride through town in one of those new horse-drawn open cars. We'll see the shows in our monocles and we'll close the town in a whirl. And we won't come home until we've kissed a girl.